So after looking at HIMEKO Nova's kit, the next question is who are her best teammates? And honestly, her team building is a lot more complicated than most characters. The biggest reason is her protocol system. Some teammates help her enter protocol decimation, which is currently her strongest state and makes her SS skill much easier to trigger. Others push her into protocol verdict, which right now feels noticeably weaker. Because of that, not every strong character automatically becomes a strong HIMEKO Nova teammate. Some unit gains a lot of value simply because they help maintain decimation, while others lose value despite having powerful kits. So let's go through the characters one by one and see who works best with HIMEKO Nova, who needs more testing, and who probably is not worth considering at all. Before we begin, please hit the like and subscribe button. Now if you have done that, let's get this video started. Okay, let us first talk about the first category, which is all Astral Express member synergies. First up, we have Dan Heng. Honestly, there's not much to say here, he just doesn't bring anything meaningful to the table. What does he do for HIMEKO Nova? Pretty much nothing. So yeah, his family does not synergize well with HIMEKO Nova and potentially a bad partner for her. The same goes for Imbibitor Lune. You are simply not going to run them together. They are both DPS focused characters that want a lot of attention. Lune is a bit more willing to share the spotlight than regular Dan Heng, but not by much. Either way, it's not pairing that makes much sense. And then we have another Dan Heng variation, which is Permancer. Honestly, he's pretty solid option for HIMEKO Nova team. I would not call him her absolute best sustain, but he's definitely one of the strongest choices available right now. The issue is that, just like with the other verdict characters, you really want to avoid using Himeko's assist skill on him. You don't want to trigger the verdict state. And remember, at E0, Himeko only gets one assist skill usage per turn. So even though Permancer can technically benefit from getting extra turns, the value is not that different from other sustains if you are intentionally avoiding using the assist skill on him. Hopefully that makes sense. Next is Remembrance Trailblazer. Remembrance Trailblazer falls into very similar category. They are just incredibly strong support in general, and they also count as Astral Express member, which is important for HIMEKO Nova. Another thing worth mentioning is that if you are using Himeko's signature light cone and her best relic setup, she always wants at least one Trailblazer companion on the team to maximize those bonuses. So no matter what, you should always be running at least one. Because of that, Remembrance Trailblazer ends up being a really good option. They are especially attractive for sustainless teams. I can definitely see comps where they are your only Trailblazer companion and still perform really well. Plus, they are completely free to play, which is always a huge bonus. Basically, if you own HIMEKO Nova, you will always have access to at least one good Trailblazer companion thanks to Remembrance Trailblazer. Now let's talk about Sunday. Sunday is a really interesting case. Not only is he a Trailblazer companion who can use the assist skill and gain an extra turn, but he can also action advance HIMEKO Nova. That means immediately after Sunday's turn, Himeko gets another turn and another assist skill points to work with. At first glance, that sounds absolutely insane. But Sunday is her best in slot because she really wants action advancers to generate her assist skills regardless of the type. And while Sparkle and RMC are good, Sunday is the best action advance for her because she really wants 100%. And Sunday provides the base action advance plus buff plus utility combination. The problem once again is Verdict. Since Sunday is tied to Verdict state, you don't actually want him using the assist skill. If Sunday were a decimation character instead, he would probably be HIMEKO Nova's uncontested best in slot teammate. Unfortunately, that's not the reality we have right now, so despite how strong his buffs are, Verdict holds him back quite a bit. Let's talk about Welt. Honestly guys, Welt is best in slot, like genuinely the best. Right now I think Welt is by far HIMEKO Nova's strongest teammate. Not only does he allow her to enter decimation state, but he also brings an insane amount of debuffs to the team. His skill hits multiple enemies, which means he can generate a decent amount of charge for HIMEKO Nova. His ultimate is AoE as well, and all of that combined with his debuffing allows HIMEKO Nova to deal absolutely ridiculous damage. That said, it's important to mention that Eidolons make a huge difference for Welt. An E4 Welt is on a completely different level compared to E0. If you have E4, I don't even think there's an argument anymore, he's unquestionably her best teammate. At E4, he's still probably best in slots simply because the decimation state is so valuable for HIMEKO Nova, but compared to his higher Eidolons, he's a lot less impressive. Once you get E2, things start getting much better. The additional ultimate utility means he can cycle his ultimate more frequently, which significantly improves the uptime on his debuffs and the weightless state. That extra consistency makes a noticeable difference. So overall, E2 Welt is a comfortable best in slot. E4 Welt is best in slot by a mile, and even E0 is still good for HIMEKO Nova. Now we move on to Preservation March. She's actually a decimation teammate, which is immediately a point in her favor. Using the assist skill on her is not a problem because it helps maintain decimation and activates the team-wide buffs. That said, this unit is clearly need more testing. The reason is simple. HIMEKO NOVA wants a teammate who can frequently hit multiple enemies to generate charge and fuel her assist skills. Preservation March is mostly single target outside of her ultimate, and she does not cast that ultimate often enough to make a huge difference. On top of that, she's not exactly the strongest sustain in today's meta. Still, I think she's interesting enough to discuss, unlike characters such as Dan Heng or Lune, who are basically dead on arrival. Next up is Hunt March 7. She's in a very similar position. I think she will function as a decent sub DPS alongside HIMEKO NOVA, but I don't expect her to be anywhere near the level of stronger option above her. So I don't think that she's a great fit for HIMEKO NOVA. She's probably better than Preservation March overall, and the fact that she's free definitely helps. At the very least, she should perform reasonably well. Then we have Evernight. Evernight is another character that definitely need more testing for HIMEKO comps. But somehow I think I see her future potential, especially after seeing some rumors about how Robin SP will make both HIMEKO SP and Evernight work together. It's actually kind of funny that she can work with HIMEKO at all. The biggest issue is that most of Evernight's support value revolves around Memo Sprite damage, and HIMEKO NOVA does not deal Memo Sprite damage. So from a pure synergy standpoint, they are not exactly a perfect match. However, Evernight deals absurd amount of damage on her own, especially at E1 or E2. At E0, she's probably around the same level as the March variants, but once you start adding Eidolons, things get a lot more interesting. She also attacks multiple enemies very frequently, which helps generate charge for HIMEKO NOVA and make assist attacks happen more often. Will it actually a top tier combo? Probably not, but it's definitely interesting and future characters could potentially make it even better. Finally, let's talk about the original HIMEKO. Normal HIMEKO is surprisingly interesting here since HIMEKO NOVA can break enemy toughness regardless of weakness type. She can help trigger regular HIMEKO's follow-up attacks more consistently. Then regular HIMEKO's AoE follow-up attacks can help generate even more charge for Nova, creating a nice feedback loop between the two. I think this pairing could be genuinely fun, especially in pure fiction where AoE damage matters a lot. Do I think it's going to be one of her strongest teams? Not really, but it's definitely worth mentioning. And unlike many of the verdict characters, regular HIMEKO actually grants the decimation state, which is exactly what HIMEKO NOVA wants. Now let's move on to characters who are not trail-based companions and talk about what they can bring to HIMEKO NOVA teams. Starting with Tribi. HIMEKO NOVA's synergy with her is actually pretty good, but not to the point that Tribi is a must for her. The reason is pretty simple. Tribi is already one of the best supports for AoE-focused characters in general, especially if you happen to own her E1, which I know quite a few players do. Not everyone, of course, but it's worth mentioning. Even at E0 though, Tribi is going to be a very solid teammate for HIMEKO NOVA. One of the biggest reasons is her frequent follow-up attacks. When HIMEKO NOVA is in the decimation state, Tribi's AoE follow-ups becomes incredibly valuable because they constantly generate charge for Nova, while also benefiting from all of Tribi's buffs. So not only is Tribi increasing HIMEKO NOVA's damage, she's also helping trigger Nova's follow-up attacks more often. Because of that, I think Tribi will fit naturally into a lot of HIMEKO NOVA teams and remain one of her strongest support options on release. The reason is that there's another character we are about to talk about who basically does everything Tribi does, but better, and that is Mortonak's Blade. Mortonak's Blade is incredibly interesting when paired with HIMEKO NOVA. On top of having arguably the strongest buffs and debuffs in the game right now, he's also one of the best general purpose units available. But what really makes him stand out here is the fact that he can consistently provide AoE attacks, which helps funnel decimation charge into HIMEKO NOVA and lets her trigger follow-up attacks much more frequently. At the same time, he contributes respectable personal damage and brings an absurd amount of team utility through his buffs and debuffs. Because of all that, I genuinely think Mortonak's Blade is also the best in-slot teammate for HIMEKO NOVA. What's even more interesting is how well he works alongside Welt. Both characters reduce enemy defenses and stack additional offensive debuffs, allowing your team to ignore a huge portion of enemy's defense. Just having Welt and Mortonak's Blade together creates a ridiculous amount of damage amplification before you even factor in what HIMEKO NOVA herself is doing. This is where team building starts to get really interesting. If you are running Mortonak's Blade, something like Dunham Permancer becomes much harder to justify. Let's say this is the team setup we are using. Running Mortonak's Blade together with Dunhang Permancer can become problematic because Permancer simply does not provide enough healing to comfortably support Blade's playstyle. Blade wants to constantly trigger his follow-up attacks, which means he's regularly draining his own HP. Eventually, he's going to reach dangerously low health, and sooner or later you are going to run into survivability issues. Even if you own Dunhang Permancer's signature Light Cone, which provides a bit of healing, it's still usually not enough to fully solve the problem. That's what makes Mortonak's Blade team so interesting. Once he's included, you are often pushed toward using a more dedicated sustain option because keeping him healthy becomes much more important for maintaining consistent performance throughout the fight. Then we have the sustain characters that are actually worth talking about, Huohuo and Hyacinth. Starting with Huohuo, she's definitely an interesting option because she provides a team-wide energy regen and attack buff, which HIMEKO NOVA does appreciate. Let's say you are running into a team with Wealth, Mortonak's Blade, HIMEKO NOVA, and you need a sustain. Huohuo fits in pretty naturally. Her energy support is always valuable, HIMEKO NOVA gets more ultimates, the whole team benefits, and Blade can safely use his full kit without constantly worrying about sitting at 1 HP. The only awkward part is the Huohuo mainly buffs attack, while Mortonak's Blade scales from HP. So while HIMEKO NOVA gets nice boost from Huohuo, Blade does not benefit nearly as much from those buffs. That becomes a bit noticeable when your entire team is contributing meaningful damage. Of course, if your Blade is built mostly for utility, debuff uptime, and ultimate uptime rather than personal damage, then this issue matters a lot less, and Huohuo becomes an even stronger option. That said, if you do care about maximizing Blade's damage, I think Hyacinth ends up being the better choice. One of the biggest reasons is that Huohuo does not contribute any AoE attacks herself, while Hyacinth constantly throws out AoE damage. Those frequent AoE hits help generate decimation charge for HIMEKO NOVA, allowing her to trigger follow-up attacks much more often. Because of that, I think HIMEKO NOVA's current best team is pretty straightforward. You run well to activate the decimation state and make full use of HIMEKO NOVA's assist skill whenever it's his turn. Then you add Mortonak's Blade for additional buffs, debuffs, and a respectable amount of damage. Finally, Hyacinth rounds everything out by providing freaking AoE attacks that help feed charge into HIMEKO NOVA. Blade contributes to that as well, and Hyacinth also boosts Blade's damage significantly. Now let's talk about Sparkle. Sparkle is another character that still has the potential to be on HIMEKO NOVA team but somehow below 3B in terms of synergy, especially if she's currently the best in slot for another teams, so I think you might want to give her for Archer instead. But honestly, her buffs are simply stronger than Sunday's in most situations. Sunday have the advantage of synergizing with some characters, and HIMEKO NOVA can take advantage of that. But when you factor that in, Sparkle's buffs are still at least comparable, if not outright better. She also solves skill points issues entirely. You have never to worry about Wealth running out of skill points, Hyacinth needing one, or any other SP related problems. If you're already using someone like Wealth to keep HIMEKO NOVA in the decimation state, then Sparkle becomes an excellent third slot support, especially if you don't own Mortonak's Blade. She can actually advance HIMEKO NOVA, giving her more turns, more assist skill opportunities, and overall stronger buff support. Because of that, I honestly think Sparkle ends up performing around the same level as Sunday here. Moving on, let's talk about Asheville. Asheville's synergy with HIMEKO NOVA is kind of unique, but this one is definitely need more testing. But I think I have seen some people showcase them together in the same team on YouTube. Technically, if you are willing to play sustainless, a team like Wealth, Mortonak's Blade, Asheville, and HIMEKO NOVA could be incredibly powerful. The biggest reason is Mortonak's Blade's E2. If HIMEKO NOVA's ultimate counts as a follow-up attack and benefits from all the follow-up bonuses that both Blade and Asheville provide, the damage potential becomes absolutely ridiculous. The problem is team building. If you are running those three together, you still need a sustain and an Astral Express companion. Your realistic options become character like March 7 Preservation or Danheng Brahmancer, but Danheng Brahmancer can't properly sustain Mortonak's Blade over longer fights, which creates a major issue. If you eventually get Astral Express Healer, that could completely change things. Right now though, that character does not exist, and because of that, Asheville's synergy with HIMEKO NOVA ends up being held back quite a bit. Now if you do own E2 Mortonak's Blade and Asheville and you are comfortable playing sustainless with Wealth, I honestly think that could become one of the highest damage team compositions in the entire game. But again, that's a sustainless setup, and most players are not interested in running those teams, so I don't put too much weight on it. Finally, let's talk about the Herta. The Herta desperately wants a second jurisdiction character on the team, and HIMEKO NOVA technically fills that requirement. The unfortunate part is that HIMEKO NOVA is not really the jurisdiction partner the Herta has been waiting for. That said, you can absolutely build teams around the two of them. For example, you could run HIMEKO NOVA alongside the Herta and then free up your sustain options, since you would not necessarily need Wealth to maintain the team structure. It's not something I expect to become meta-defining, but it's definitely a team composition worth experimenting with once HIMEKO NOVA releases. This team is actually pretty interesting, but you still want to be in the decimation state. Yeah, you definitely need decimation state, which means Wealth pretty much has to be there. So your team could look something like this: HIMEKO NOVA, Wealth, the Herta, and then maybe Hyacinth as your sustain. The good thing is that you will get a lot of frequent AoE attacks from the team, which helps funnel charge into HIMEKO NOVA and lets her trigger more assist skill attacks. But is this actually her best in slot team? Honestly, no. And that's basically some character synergies that HIMEKO NOVA could have in the future. Of course, all of this still could change depending on the future updates. Overall, what do you guys think about the state of HIMEKO NOVA's team right now? And if you do have your own version of her teams, please put that on the comment below. If you enjoyed and found this video helpful, please hit the like and subscribe button, turn on notification as well so you won't be missing out on any of my Star Rail content. I will see you guys on my next one. Bye bye!